Get ready to hear from two Black American women responding to African man, disrespecting freedmen, Black Americans' cultural history. Check it out.
Okay, so y'all seen the video of that man passionately talking about how Black Americans had no culture. I think I have something clicked in my mind regarding why the rest of the diaspora keeps saying that we as Black Americans have no culture when we as Black Americans clearly can see what our culture is. It's very confusing for us. And I think that part of the issue is that we do not have an immigrant story as Black Americans. Black Americans are not immigrants. Black Americans are Americans. We literally were here before America was America. We were here at the inception of this country. We are Americans, period, point blank, period. But every other part of the diaspora has an immigrant story. They definitely have one when they come to America. So if you are from outside the America and you are a black person that you come from outside America, African or, Caribbean, or even like a Black Brit who has an immigrant story to the UK, there is a term called cultural fossilization. It's something that I've heard immigrants, not just from the diaspora, but also Latino immigrants describe, that I never connected it to why people say Black Americans don't have culture until today. Cultural fossilization is when, let's say your parents immigrated to America from Nigeria in the 80s. Okay. Whenever they did that, their culture was kind of frozen in time. So whatever culture they had in Nigeria, when they came to America, they maintained that culture, and they maintained that culture with all the other people that are around them, all the Nigerians that are around them. So their culture is like solidified, and they pass that on to their children, and that's the culture. Meanwhile, back home in Nigeria, the culture is evolving, just like Black American culture is evolving. So your culture kind of gets concentrated. If you come from another place and you come to America, your culture from back home kind of gets concentrated into this one solidified culture. It doesn't evolve. It just stays frozen. That's why they call it cultural fossilization. And I've heard Latinos say this as well. Like they would have this culture, and when they go back home, they speak in ways, the slang is different, everything's different. And people are looking at them like, why are you talking like it's 1985? That's the year their parents immigrated here. So their culture stays the same. And the reason why they say that Black Americans have no culture is because our culture evolves like any culture would. Our slang evolves, our style of dress, our, music, our hairstyles, just the way that we are, our thoughts, our feelings, the way that we move, it changes because cultures evolve as time goes on. But if you came from another place, your culture didn't evolve. It stayed frozen in time, in the time that you came here. So that, I think that's part of the reason why they say Black Americans have no culture, because their culture is like put in glass, and they do the same cultural norms that they did 40 years ago. They continue that, and they think that like, immortalization of that time and of their culture is culture. They don't see it as the evolving of a group. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's also very unfortunate, because you're seeing that you don't have the evolution of your culture. Your kids come here, and then by the second, third generation, they start to take on the characteristics and mannerisms of Black Americans because our culture stays evolving, and you don't like it. So then you lash out at us. That's just my perspective. Tell me what you think of cultural fossilization.
I watched the viral clip of that bald-headed African dude that was talking to that Haitian lady on his podcast about how Black Americans, we're the only people that don't have a culture, that don't have any value systems, any traditions, any taboos, blah, blah, blah. And I've watched some different takes on this, but I actually have a little bit of a different take. Okay, so my microphone just went out. But anyways, I have a little bit of a different take, because listening to that clip made me realize something about the way that Africans view culture and traditions when it comes to Black people. So the reason why Africans say stuff like Black Americans don't have culture, we don't know who we are, we don't know where we come from, is because our culture in America doesn't center Africa. So what I mean by that is, if you look at like the Caribbean and South America, a lot of their culture and traditions mimic cultures or mimic the things that are done culturally in Africa, in different parts of Africa. So they've taken a lot of that African tradition and incorporated it into their cultures down in the Caribbean and in South America. So that's why they're not going to tell them that they don't know who they are, they don't know where they came from, they're lost. They're not going to say that to them because their culture, a lot of their culture resembles that different cultures in Africa. Whereas in America, as Black Americans, most of our culture, especially not mainstream culture, does not resemble anything African. Our culture does not center Africa. I don't think that Africans can really wrap their head around the idea of a group of Black people who just came up with their own culture that's based off of their own experience and that has absolutely nothing to do with anywhere on the continent of Africa. So in their eyes, it's like, you guys must be lost because you don't center Africa in your culture. You don't center Africa in the things that you do. Nothing that you do resembles African, anything in Africa. You don't resemble. We can't draw any parallels between what you guys are doing in America into Africa. I mean, even if we're just talking about lifestyles, like when you look at Haiti and Nigeria, you're not going to really see too much difference between a city in Haiti and a city in Nigeria. It's still full of scrap metal housing made out of shipping containers. There's extreme poverty in both of those areas, and they really kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways. And even in Jamaica, like certain parts of Jamaica could look similar to somewhere in Ghana or somewhere. So I feel like they have more of like that connection. Like, so I really feel like Africans look at Caribbeans and they see a lot of themselves in the lifestyles of the people there, but they don't see the reflection of themselves in us. And I think that they look at that as like somehow we are lost or we don't have any pride, or because we don't feel connected to Africa. So if we're Black and we don't feel connected to Africa, that means that there's something wrong with us, and that means that we're lost. They say that Black Americans have main character syndrome and we're self-centered, but yet the way that they view culture and the reason why they tell us that we don't know who we are, we don't have a culture, or we don't have traditions, or we don't, we're just lost, is because our culture doesn't resemble theirs. Our culture doesn't center Africa, but somehow we're the main character. But aside from all of that, I don't feel like anybody has the right to tell somebody else that they don't have a culture. You don't have a right to speak on another group of people's lifestyle. Like, you just, and the lady that he was sitting across from, honestly, I just don't think that her elevator goes to the top floor. I don't think that she has the mental bandwidth to engage in a conversation like that. But I feel like a lot of times they pick people like that specifically that they know won't really have no pushback, that don't have the mental capacity to go back and forth with them and actually educate them. Because apparently she did not. She just sat there looking like boo-boo the fool and had no rebuttals at all. So, but anyways, that's my take.
I used to wonder how continent of Africa was taken over by Europeans and Arabs. Listening to this African man rant helps me to understand why. There is a great book I read years ago written by Chancellor Williams called The Destruction of Black Civilization. It is one of the most important works written on African history and its relationship to the present struggles of Black people worldwide. In this book, Williams set out to answer a painful question. How could a continent so rich in resources, culture, and civilization be overtaken by Arabs and Europeans? His answer was both historical and political, showing that the downfall of Africa was not inevitable, but the result of a combination of internal weakness and external invasion. Williams described Africa as the birthplace of great civilizations: Egypt, Nubia, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, and Kush, Societies that had once thrived with advanced knowledge of science, medicine, trade, and governance long before Europe rose to prominence. Yet Africa's strength was undermined from within. Rivalries between tribes and kingdoms made unity impossible. Betrayal and the selling of captives into slavery weakened resistance, and the absence of long-term political organization left the continent exposed to foreign domination. These divisions made it easy for outsiders to conquer and exploit Africa. The Arabs came first, spreading Islam across North Africa, but also establishing systems of slavery and Arabization that disrupted indigenous cultures. Later, Europeans arrived with the transatlantic slave trade, followed by colonization and the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884, where European powers carved Africa into artificial states as though it were property. Williams emphasized that this conquest was not only physical, but psychological. Arabs and Europeans spread ideas of black inferiority, teaching Africans to look down on their traditions and to glorify foreign religions, languages, and systems. This destruction of identity was as devastating as the loss of land and resources. These themes are not confined to Africa's past. They echo in the tensions between Black Americans and Africans today. Some Black Americans recall Africans selling prisoners of war captives into slavery, while some Africans view Black Americans as too Americanized or disconnected from African culture. This division, rooted in colonial narratives and reinforced by miseducation, prevents unity in the face of common struggles. So, here we see this African man having a lot of smoke for foundational Black Americans instead of fixing his country. Many of these African immigrants have extreme self-hate. He needs to shift his focus to helping the people in his country and fellow Africans, instead of allowing Europeans, Asians, Arabs continuing to control the continent of Africa. The more things change, the more things remain the same. Tell me what you think about this topic. Hope you find the information in this video informative. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Thanks for watching.